I had a young medic on my team, and we were two of the top graduates from the language course, and we used to speak Polish to each other all the time, but only to each other. Yeah. So we didn't really know whether we were speaking a form of Polish that would be easily understood by the population of Poland, or if we were just speaking some kind of weird Polish Esperanto that only the two of us could understand. That why don't we go to Poland and find out? Say, well, they'll never let us go to Poland. Come on, it's a Warsaw Pact. But that was 1980, the glass nose with us, or 79 probably. It was loosening up a little bit. I don't remember the exact dates. I could look them up because a lot of was going on in the world right then, but we put in a request to go on leave and spend 2 weeks in Poland, and oddly enough, they okayed it. So we were in Germany doing something, and instead of going back to the States with the rest of the team, we took our leave and we went to the Polish border, and we laid out. It was very complicated. You had to have every hotel room that you were going to go to, and you had a time frame to be there. So if you're going from like Poland to Czestochowa, or from Warsaw to Czestochowa or whatever, you had exactly so many hours to be there, and if you weren't there on time, they put out a arrest warrant and stuff like that. So we get to the border, and we've done all this preliminary work, and he said, sorry, you can't come. Because the new Polish Pope had picked that same week to go back to Poland for the first time. And he canceled every hotel reservation for everybody else, so his entourage would have free. Oh, geez. So we're like,
Catholics, you know.
Yeah.
Papists.
Well, we're like, well, that really sucks. But there wasn't anything we could do, so we just flew back to the States and went back to work. Well, once again, the weird thing happens. Month and a half goes by, and I get called. I say, Dave Miller, they want to see you down at the MI company. Not the 10th Group's MI company, but the big MI company for the main post for the 591st or someday. I don't even remember. So I said, okay. So I wandered down there, and here's a civilian. Turned out later he wasn't a civilian. He was actually a warrant officer in civilian clothes, but he looked like a civilian. Named Bob. No other name, just Bob. And he goes, Sergeant Miller, I want to talk to you about your impressions from your trip to Poland and what you saw over there and what you did. And I said, well, Bob, you didn't get the latest news, because all I saw was a sort of nasty border patrol guy that told me to get the hell out. They wouldn't let us in because of the Pope's visit. He's like, oh, really? And I said, yeah, I never got into Poland at all. So then I guess he didn't have anywhere to go because he thought it was going to be a couple hour debrief. So he just starts talking small talk. And he's like, well, what do you do here and what's your job? I just chit-chatted with him for a little while, and I went back to work. So not long after that, I got sent to Pathfinder School at Fort Benning, Georgia, which is kind of an advanced airborne thing. They teach you how to set up drop zones and how to set up landing zones and be a kind of a bush air traffic controller and stuff like that. So I'm in Pathfinder School. I get a call to see the colonel. And I go into the office after the day's schooling is over, and there's Bob with another one-syllable name civilian named Norm. So Bob and Norm said, we want to take you out to dinner. And I said, I'm not sure I'm allowed to leave the post because I'm in student status here. And they said, oh, don't worry, that's all been taken care of. You have any civilian clothes? I said, yeah. We'll put some civilian clothes on and we'll pick you up at 6:30. So I went back to the barracks, changed into civilian clothes. They picked me up. We went down into Columbus, Georgia somewhere, and to a restaurant. And they just started asking, and they knew everything about me. They knew, well, we know that you worked for the BNDD, and we know that you did this project with Colonel Peach, and they knew everything. And while we were at dinner, someone I knew came by the table to say hello. And I immediately made up a story in my head of who these two other guys were, which they really liked. So
quick on your feet.
They said, we've got a job for you, and if you're interested. And I said, yeah, I'm always interested. Great. So they went away, and I went back up to Fort Devens, and some more time goes by, and I get a call on the telephone from Norm, and he goes, listen, we want you and your wife to come to dinner down in Boston. And I said, okay. And he told me the restaurant and the time and everything. And I told her, I said, we're going to go down and have dinner with these guys. I'm not quite sure who they are, but it sounds interesting. So we got in, they had these big round booths with the button tuck red, old fashioned, like somebody sitting in the Brown Derby in 1934. And we're sitting in there, and they come in, and it's Norm and a guy named Bill. They all have one syllable anymore. Yeah.
But it's mature.
And they sit on each side, and they show her their credentials. I've never seen them. I guess they figured they didn't need to show me, but they got the little baby blue cards. Show the credentials to my wife, and they say, we want your husband to come to work for us. And I'll never forget this, because she said, she asked them two questions. Is he going to get killed? And they said, we don't think it's particularly more dangerous than what he's already doing, just different. Okay. Is there going to be any money involved? Yes, he will make more money than he's
How much of it do I get?
And that was it. That was her. And okay, cool. It's all fine with me. So then I went off and and I can't get into the details of that very much, because even though it was 43 years ago, and it's probably declassified by now, I don't know that for a fact. And even though, it's all about sources and methods, as you know, the sources are all probably dead by now, but the methods may not have changed, and I don't know for a fact whether they have. So, but basically, they were a military unit out of Fort Meade, Maryland, who did a lot of completely off the book stuff, did a lot of stuff with the civilian intelligence community, and eventually wound up taking functional control both over the unit in Berlin that Nick was in when it changed its name and mission statement slightly from Detachment A to PSSE.
Pissy.
And then in a whole new thing that was being created at that time in Northern Virginia. So I got in on all the early formation of that.
The elite of the elite, like everything else.
They formed it up because they got tired of being lied to by the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, well, it grew out of intelligence failures around the Iran hostage situation. That was it grew around basically three people, Lemke, Meadows, and
Scotty McEwen,
who took on an intelligence assignment that the civilian intelligence agencies were either unable or unwilling to do. So it grew up. It was based on those three guys, and grew into whatever the hell it is now. It was there's some funny stories about typical Army. the first thing they did was go over everybody's 201 file, and they picked the people based on what was in the files, and they all went away, supposedly to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and that's where they told us they were going. And then most of them in the very near future were back, because apparently it wasn't an efficient way of choosing people by just looking at their 201. So you don't really know anything, you know? So about 80% of the people that disappeared on the first go around wound up back, and they weren't allowed to say anything, although some of them probably said more than they should have. And then a short while later, they started doing in-person recruitment. So I was, by then, the NCOIC of counterintelligence at the 10th Military Intelligence Company. So I'm over on group headquarters one day. I see a bunch of my friends standing in line in the hallway. I said, "What are you guys doing here?" And they said, "Oh, Captain McGuire, who was a captain that had been a team leader in our unit, who I, in fact, had gone to ski school with in Italy, had left, and he was back, and he was wearing a blue suit that had a really dark tan. And he's got some other guy with him, and they're interviewing people in group headquarters." Why? They're interviewing for some kind of secret project. And I said, "Well, I want to get in on that." So I went to the S1. I said, "Hey, I want to be interviewed for this secret project. Why am I being left out?" He said, "Well, yeah, okay." So he put my name on the list, and I went and interviewed. Then I got
to get a waiver for your eyes.
I got a call from the people, and they said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, this sounds like a really interesting thing." So I put my name on the list to see about it. He goes, "Who the hell do you think you're working for now?" And I said, "Oh, really?"
Yeah, welcome to the shadowy world.